Well, it's really great to be with Tim and Gill Roberts today. And for some time, Gill, who is an old friend of mine, we go back many, many years. For some time, Gill has wanted to share some of the things that God has been speaking to her and laying on her heart. And I think you're going to find this really encouraging. So, Gill.
Thank you.
Please carry on.
Yeah, it's been an interesting year for Tim and for me, and God has really been talking to us and sharing things with us that have been quite new in some ways, and in other ways not new at all, but a new way of looking at things. Excuse my voice, because it's very weak. I was having a very sleepless night a few weeks ago. I was actually in hospital, and if you've ever been to hospital and had a night in hospital, things are strange and noisy. It's hard to sleep. But I was very peaceful, and while I was lying in the bed, I had a real sense that Father God was sitting right with me, holding my hand, just being there. And I had an amazing sense of peace. And I wasn't really saying anything to him, and he wasn't to me at first. And then suddenly, I just knew he was saying, "Who is the gardener?" And I thought, well, I've been a Christian a long time. I know the answer to that. You're the gardener, God. I knew that because years and years ago, when I first became a Christian, I read this book called My Father is the Gardener. It's a good book. So I could remember that. I knew, yes, you're the gardener. I've got that right. Good. And he sat with me and he waited. And I pondered the garden and gardens, and things were going through my head as they do. And then he said to me, "So why are you trying to do the gardening?" And I thought, oh, but I thought I had to do some jobs as well. I kind of thought, I don't know, I had a responsibility, I don't know. And I just lay there thinking about gardens. And it was as if every now and then it was like he was holding my hand, stroking my hand and saying things and letting me just think and ponder and wonder. And ever since then it's been like a pot stirring, the whole thing about gardens, that things come to the surface and I think, oh yes, that's what it's about. Oh yes, this is what he's talking about. This is what those verses are actually heading towards. And for me, and I'm not saying I'm bringing some great universal truth, it's a picture of a garden. I'm not telling everyone they've got to do better gardening, and I'm not telling everyone, go and focus on gardens. I'm saying this is what he said to me, that he brought this picture of gardens into my life that's still rumbling on, still there. So he's the gardener. That was the big thing. So why do I try to do the gardening? And it took me back to years ago. My husband Tim and I, we've been married for 40 years this year. And when we first got married, we were on honeymoon, and I was a very, very new Christian when I got married. I thought I'd had about 3 sins I had to get rid of, and I kind of weeded those out. Now, that was my sort of some knowledge of things, and I was reading the Bible and not understanding very much of it, but suddenly I love poetry, suddenly finding that the poetry of it and the beauty of it was doing something to my spirit. And I read in Deuteronomy, "The land you are entering to take over is not like the land of Egypt from which you've come, where you planted your seed and irrigated it by foot, as in a vegetable garden. But the land you are crossing the Jordan to take possession of is a land of mountains and valleys that drinks rain from heaven. It is a land that the Lord your God cares for. The eyes of the Lord your God are continually on it from the beginning of the year until its end. And I just thought that was beautiful. And when God spoke to me recently, that came back to me again. And I had far more understanding. You know, this verse is, these verses are, there's a story behind it. These people had come from Egypt. They'd come from slavery. They'd come from a place where everything was hard work. And they knew that. They understood that way of planting a garden. They understood that you grew vegetables, everything was a challenge, everything was difficult. But God was promising them that actually he was going to be the gardener. He was going to come, take over that garden, water it himself, look after it himself. It would drink rain from heaven. And he would constantly be watching that garden. And just came to me as another new revelation. My goodness, it is truly his work. It is honestly not my work. It's his. And he was saying to them, don't go back to the past. Don't go back to the hard work and the way you used to do it. I want you to move forward and let me do it now. Let me look after you. Let me uproot some weeds, but let me make it beautiful. Let me put what I want into my garden. He will choose to landscape his garden in the way he wants to. Can I let him? Can I let him take over my life to the point where actually I don't do the gardening? And that's some of the thoughts I'm going to be bringing out now. Will I hanker for what's past in my life? And there's a lot of things now for me that are past in my life. Will I hanker for them, or will I let him create a new garden, watered by him, used by him, enjoyed by him? And I started to think, but what is the garden? Yes, he's the gardener, so I'm not the gardener. He is, but what's the garden? And of course, he said to me, and I hope I'm not being too personal about God here, but he said to me, Gilly, you're the garden. And I knew that really. But I thought, is he really saying that he's creating me to be his garden? Does he really want me to be that special to him? I'm his garden. He's making me that. I can't create myself. He has to do it. He wants me to be the garden that he creates for his pleasure. It's mind-blowing. It's just incredible. And the more I thought about it, the more I wondered, this is just me. This obviously is. It's not just me. Therefore, we're all gardens that he's making, and we're all different. It's not about getting rid of weeds or throwing up a nice fountain. It's not about that. It's about him continually creating and enjoying and making and doing something different in each one of us in order to have something beautiful for himself to enjoy. So this has been going on and on in me, but then the more I thought about it, the more amazed I became. And I thought, but what is it for? Okay, the garden is me. He's the gardener. But what's the garden actually used for? What's its purpose? And of course, we've had many gardens. We've had gardens with full of teenagers, where it's mainly football and broken flowers and rabbits eating everything. And we've had lovely gardens, and which we've worked very hard at, and we've created gardens, and we've been frustrated by them. They've been used for all sorts of things. Tim made a garden for my sister when she was going through a very difficult time, and he helped to landscape a new garden for her. Some gardens are more formal, and some have kind of strange and quirky things in them that you don't expect to see. I've got a picture here of my beloved father and one of my sons just sitting in our garden reading together, just sitting. And my niece playing bubbles in the garden, and the tire swing. Gardens are for playing, for enjoying, for having fun, for nurturing, for playing in the paddling pool with your granddaughter. They're for all sorts of things. They're for just sitting, and they're for weeding, and they're for caring for and improving. But we can so easily focus on the garden being kind of there to keep tidy, to get rid of the things we don't want, to make sure that the garden is always looking as it should be. But actually, I'm the garden, and God is less bothered about me being perfect and getting rid of things in my life and putting the right things in my life than He is about coming and being in the garden with me, just being in me. That's what He wants. We can so easily focus on the weeds, so easily focus on the negative things, or the things that need changing or improving, or the lawn needs mowing, or this needs doing. But it's for pleasure. It's for God's pleasure, His enjoyment, conversation, sharing, eating, listening, just being. God wants us as His garden to be His place of dwelling, the place He lives. So it's for Him. The garden is for Him primarily. I am for Him. That's why I exist. That's why I'm alive today. Because He is living in me. That's the sole purpose. I'm His garden. His pleasure comes from being in me. He is absolutely besotted with us. He loves His gardens. He's doing something amazing in each one of us by creating a garden. He just wants to be in us and enjoy it. And sometimes He goes and digs up a weed and He doesn't make a fuss. And sometimes He does much, much more big, radical things that leave us reeling and wondering what's going on. But He's always creating us to be His garden, for Him to live in. You know, one of the real downsides, of course, of a garden is the whole thing of weeds, slugs, and other people around us encroaching somehow. You know, we have lovely neighbours here. We have one side, she really looks after her garden. The other side, not so much. And I was talking to God about that, saying, well, you know, thinking again, people's lives being their gardens, and sometimes people's lives are full of mess and weeds. I was saying, God, are you saying we should just accept that and, you know, that's fine? And He said, well, maybe they've not met the gardener. And I thought, that is so true. They need to meet the gardener, but not to improve them, not to make sure every weed is got rid of, but so that He can enjoy that garden too. And maybe we look over our fence sometimes at our neighbour's garden and say, well, I had those weeds in my garden you ought to get rid of them from yours. Well, maybe not. Maybe they're going to be a source of a little nature reserve. Maybe God's doing something really incredible among those weeds that seem like a mess in someone else's garden. Maybe in my garden there seems to be a mess. There seems to be things I really don't want. But let's not be rushing in too quick to say, come on God, bit of pruning. Sometimes the pruning comes at the wrong time. Sometimes there are birds laying nests in our gardens, in the trees and in the bushes in the garden. And the last thing you want to do, if there are birds nesting, is to be pruning that bush. Maybe sometimes God leaves things alone, not because he's not bothered, because he's doing something else. Let's look at one another's gardens and our own garden in a way that's positive and understands that different things are happening in different people's lives. And it's not about getting everything neat and tidy, getting everything right and getting everything in order. And it's certainly not about getting everything the same in everybody's lives, in everybody's gardens. It's actually about knowing what he's doing, understanding something of what he's doing in my life and in your life, and together as a church in our lives, so that when he puts those gardens together, everyone is different, everyone is unique, and everyone has things in it that need to be done, things that have been done, things that we don't have a clue yet, but are going to be quite radical. Every one of us is building a landscape. He's building a landscape for himself to enjoy. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. That's why he wants to be in his garden. Let's make sure we find out what he's doing. If we can, find out, what is it you're doing right now in my life, God? What is it you're wanting the garden to be? Are you creating something a bit different at the moment? Are you wanting to do anything about this aspect of my life, or are you going to deal with that another time? And what about this person I'm concerned about? There are some weeds there, but maybe you just want me to watch and love and see what's happening. It's his responsibility. It's all his responsibility. It's not mine. Now, when he comes in and changes things in the garden, there's a lot of letting go has to happen. And when we moved to our house here in Rugby, and I found some things very hard. And one of the things that was hard was that I'd had in Peterborough, where we lived, a beautiful garden, big and very beautiful. We'd worked hard on it. It had a lot of colour. It had lots and lots of things that were established, and I loved it. And when we came here, it's a very small garden, quite encroached on by others, and there was a lot that I felt negative about, really, with the garden. And yet, God has done things, and the garden's changed. We've changed the garden, and I can see him doing that in our lives. But when things change, it's very hard to let go of what was good, because these things were good. They were great things. But if we can let go of some of those things and let him create a new garden, a different landscape, it's going to be so much more than if we'd just held on to the old things. One of the things recently that God's been doing, he really has been creating a new garden in me. I have become a different garden. I've had to let go of a lot of things. I've had to learn to live life very differently. And it's as if he's come in and said, okay, that's it. another garden, another thing happening. And I honestly wanted my old life back. I would have loved to have had my old life back. But he's doing it. It's what he's chosen to do. And it's for him to live in. It's not to improve me. It's not because I wasn't good enough before. The whole purpose is for him to be in his garden. And I'm almost certainly coming to the end of my life now. This will be my last garden on this earth. But it'll be amazing afterwards. But this will be my last garden on this earth. And I just want him to sit in his garden and enjoy his garden and talk to me. My life is his garden. Sometimes it's terrifying and challenging. Sometimes he wanders in and does a bit of weeding. Sometimes I sense he's just smiling at me. He's just here. He's just with me in my garden, in his garden, the garden that he's creating. And he's not going to stop creating it. There are surprises every day along the way. My dad used to say, sometimes I just sits and thinks, and sometimes I just sit. And that's how I feel it is with my father at the moment and me. Sometimes we sits and thinks together, and sometimes we just sits together. So, what is my role? What do I do? Well, most of all, let him come into my garden. Let him in. Let him do what he wants to do without worrying about it. Appreciate what he's doing. Try and understand something of it, and appreciate what he's doing in other people's gardens without criticism or judgment or comparison or thinking, oh my goodness, I wish my garden was as good as theirs. I wish my life was as good as theirs. I wish I did this and that. No, that's not what he's doing in me. Right now he's doing something else in me, and I want him to enjoy the garden he's making me to be. But I can also enjoy other people's gardens. I can enjoy their lives. I love to hear about what people are doing, the things God is doing in their lives, the things that are going on. That's their garden. And I can enjoy that beauty too. I've just got some verses from Song of Songs here, and that came to me the other day, and I just thought this was summing up really, the gardener and the garden. I'm not taking Song of Songs on any other level right now. I'm just looking at that. You are a garden locked up, my sister, my bride. You are a spring enclosed, a sealed fountain. Your plants are an orchard of pomegranates with choice fruits, with henna and nard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, with every kind of incense tree, with myrrh and aloes and all the finest spices. You are a garden fountain, a well of flowing water streaming down from Lebanon. That's what the gardener is saying to the garden. You are a garden. You're beautiful. I'm making you what I want you to be. And he is the gardener. The next part of those verses, awake, north wind, come, south wind, blow on my garden, that its fragrance may spread everywhere. Let my beloved come into his garden and taste its choice fruits. I want my Father to come into my garden that he's making. I'm not making it. He's doing it. I want him to come and sit, that he can enjoy the garden that he's creating in me. The Holy Spirit comes to his garden. He comes to enjoy it, not just to keep improving it. He rests in it, and he laughs in it, and he chats in it. He delights in it. Sometimes he will uproot swathes of things But most of the time, he's just there, enjoying. Am I prepared to let him really enjoy being in me, just being in me? Sometimes it's risky. We have to take a risk. We like to be in our comfort zone, even if that means this is how I like my garden to be. I like to look like this, or this is the kind of person I am. And I know that, and therefore to actually expect me to be somebody different, do something different, is hard. And of course, he doesn't expect us to be anyone other than who we are, but he does challenge us. He does challenge our borders. He does sometimes say, I'm going to create something different now. You be ready for this. You be prepared, because there's going to be an area I'm going to take you into, and that's going to then be part of that beautiful landscape. This is somebody called Anne Nin, a poet, and she wrote, "And then the day came when the risk to remain tight in the bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom." I feel I'm in a stage of blossoming in a new way. God's doing it. It's not me. It's not me. He's doing it. And he's helping me to have the courage to go through what the future holds. We don't know what it holds exactly, but we have a fair idea. And he's taking me and Tim by the hands, and he's walking it through with us. And out of it, he's making something beautiful. A garden for him to dwell in. That's it. It's not for us to work in. It's not for him to tidy. It's for him to dwell in. And every day I wake up in the morning and I think, I'm alive. I'm here today. I'm alive. He has a purpose. I'm his garden. Come, Holy Spirit, live in your garden. Be in me. Be in me. Every morning when I wake up, I say, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And then I say to him, when the evening comes, let me still be singing. Let me be singing when the evening comes and you take me home to be in your garden that you've prepared for me. I've lost a lot of things, but I've gained more. I honestly have gained more. I can't sing anymore, but I listen to beautiful music. My body's weak, but I have a man with strong arms who looks after me. I've lost my independence, but I've learned what it is to depend on God and to depend on others, and how amazing it is. Inside, I'm dancing.